Good morning and welcome to Rising. We want to bring you some updates on the Uvalde school massacre. Texas State Police have launched an investigation into the law enforcement response to the Robb Elementary School shooting that left 21 people, including 19 children, dead, killed by an 18-year-old gunman who is now deceased. Let's watch some of what DPS had to say in yesterday's press conference.
The majority of the gunfire was in the beginning. In the beginning. I say numerous. More than 25. I mean, it was a lot of gunfire in the beginning. During the negotiations, there wasn't much gunfire other than trying to keep the officers at bay. But that could change depending as once we analyze the video. But right now, according to the information, he did not respond. He walked in unobstructed initially. So from the grandmother's house to the bar ditch to the school, into the school, he was not confronted by anybody. To clear the record on that. 4 minutes later, law enforcement are coming in to solve this problem.
As we've been learning throughout the week, details that the police had originally disclosed of the case have now changed. One key detail being that the shooter, Salvador Ramos, lingered outside Robb Elementary for 12 minutes before firing shots and then walking into the school and barricading himself in a classroom where he killed 19 children and 2 teachers.
When pressed about why police were unable to get to the shooter once he was locked inside the classroom, this is what DPS had to say.
I got you. Yes, sir.
Behind that, you guys have said that he was barricaded. Can you explain to us how he was barricaded and why you guys cannot breach that door?
So I am taking all your questions into consideration. We will be doing updates. We will be doing updates to answer those questions.
Answer that question now, sir.
What is your name?
Shimon Prokopets from CNN.
I hear you.
Because we've been given a lot of bad information, so why don't you clear all of this up now and explain to us how it is that your officers who were in there for an hour, yes, rescuing people, but yet no one was able to get inside that room.
Shimon, we will circle back with you. We want to answer all your questions. We want to give you the why. That's our job. So give us time. I'm taking all your questions. I'm taking them back to talk to the team.
Can you tell us how the door was barricaded?
Look, thank you for being here. We'll talk soon. We'll talk soon.
Completely unacceptable. Well, what's more, police have admitted that there were officers who went inside the school and rescued their own children instead of engaging with Ramos.
We've heard that some law enforcement officers actually went into school to get their kids out. Can you talk about that?
Right. So what we do know, Vanessa, right now that there was some police officers, families trying to get their children out of the school because it was an active shooter situation right now. It's a terrible situation right now. And of course, just as we mentioned, the loss of life, it's just terrible. It's a terrible tragedy right now that took place. But again, we got to keep acknowledging those brave men and women that actually were there on scene that met this suspect. And of course, we know that they were met with gunfire. Some of them were shot. But at the end of this, the suspect was shot and is now deceased. The threat is now neutralized.
Reports and videos of frantic parents outside the school show police preventing them from storming the premises to rescue their kids. All the while, parents beg and scream for them to do something instead of standing there. Here's some of that.
Ryan, I think there are 3 key points in this timeline that stand out to me. 11:28 a.m. is when the crash in the ditch happens. 11:30 a.m. there is a 911 call about a gunman shooting. We know that he was firing his weapon at the funeral home across the street. So that's at 11:30. The police are not on the scene until 11:44. 11:44. So from the time of the crash to when the police get on the scene, let alone from the time that we know there are shots being fired, 14 minutes. And all the while, he's outside of a school, at least for 12 minutes, and nobody seems to have locked the front door. I mean, this is these 14 minutes are incredibly crucial. It is amazing to me that with this much time, nothing happened to prevent the obvious that was going to happen.
Right. It makes you wonder what all of the theater is for. You know, we're 23 years past Columbine, and the world has changed significantly around how hardened schools are. You know, how trigger-happy a lot of police officers are around situations. And just how nervous and jumpy people are around active shooters.
Right.
For obvious reasons, because we've now had 23 years of experiences with these shootings, and there are if this was the first time that this had happened in the United States, you could imagine, okay, they just couldn't see this coming. They couldn't imagine what was happening.
Right.
But how you get a 911 call at 11:30 and let's say the school didn't realize what was going on. You immediately call the school.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
This is outside of a school. Like, you need to lock down. Like, we now have, almost every school has lockdown drills. And so what is the point of putting kids through all of this trauma of going through these lockdown drills if when the real thing happens, everybody's just kind of sitting on their hands? Lock the basic things that could have been done, lock the school. And we were told originally that there was a resource officer that, quote, engaged.
Yep.
They must have been using engage extremely loosely. Maybe saw would be the word that they were trying to use a euphemism for. But if they did, then lock the school.
Right.
And then at least now in Sandy Hook, their school was locked. But these weapons are so intense that he was able to fire his way into the building. So just locking a door is not going to, it's not a 100% solution to this, but everything you can do to slow people down so that officers can get on the scene, potentially saves lives.
I'm confused as to how long this response time is as well. 14 minutes seems incredibly long to me.
I wonder where the station is, because, yes, it's a fact that an hour and a half outside San Antonio, this is a very spread out area. You read about the one parent who drove 40 minutes to school. That's that's how, I grew up in a rural area where some people drove 45 minutes to school. And so yes, okay, but really,
police.
That long?
It's an active shooter outside of an elementary school.
Nobody's closer than 16 minutes?
Right. It's an active shooter outside of an elementary school. You should have all hands on
deck everything
immediately.
Else.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, they should have notified the school, told them to lock all of the doors, lock down the entire school. And so, yeah, you're right. Not any single one of these measures would be enough in and of itself, definitively. We do not know that. But there are so many holes in this case, and the police have been so cagey and poorly prepared to answer the questions, which is, again, these situations are so obviously very difficult to deal with, but the performance of the law enforcement has been unacceptable.
And to me, and I'm curious for your take on this, I think the thing that ties this entire performance together is the militarization of the police. So starting in the late 70s, 80s, you started seeing the creep of militarization into the police force that really accelerated in the 90s and the 2000s, and there are two sides to it. The obvious side is the one that we see a lot, Bradley Balco in his book RoboCop or whatever it was, and where you have these cops driving these up-armored Humvees and basically looking like military or paramilitary troops, and also they start to talk in military lingo. They now refer to shifts as tours. Like an 8-hour shift, they'll say, I finished my tour.
Right.
Like, no, you finished your shift.
Right.
And so they start to see the community as hostile terrain. Like these are combatants that they have to interact with. And then their number one priority, and this is in their training, is to get home alive. That creates the aggressiveness that you see with the community. So that's the obvious part of it. The other part is the flip side, I think, that we saw in Texas here. And so in Iraq, the way that the military started rethinking its urban warfare strategy was that speed kills. Like if you're rushing through the street, rushing into a house and through a house, people are going to get killed. What you have to do is go not just house by house or apartment by apartment, but room by room. You secure every single room, and then you move to the next one.
Yeah.
And when you've cleared a house, then you clear the next house. And if that means it takes a week to clear a block, you do that. Because if you try to clear that block all in 1 hour, half your platoon is going to get wiped out. And that training is now given to all of these police forces across the country. It shouldn't be, but because evolved into this militarized police force. They get military training. So their number one goal is to get home safe to their family. And the way that you do that is, in a situation like this, is you move extremely slowly. You go classroom to classroom. And so while you'd have 19 people bleeding and in pain and in need of medical care, who knows how many could have been saved if they got in there before, they are securing the premises, following their military training, which says that the way to reduce their own casualties, their own the risk to themselves, is to not move with any speed, because speed is what's going to get them in trouble. And so as long as they continue to adopt this military mindset to policing, I think this is the kind of thing we'll see. And the other military part of it is that press conference. That's a very military press conference.
It did feel like it. And I think those videos underscore exactly what you're talking about when you see these anguished parents experiencing the worst moments of their lives, begging the police to do something. And we have on footage parents being accosted by police. Well, there's a shooter inside the school. Parents are trying to save their children and would happily rush into the school and do it themselves if the cops won't, and the cops aren't letting them. So there's all of this time elapsing, and the reporter is pushing and pushing for a question to what took so long? What took so long? We know that one girl died at the hospital and she was bleeding in that classroom, and we don't know for sure if she could have been saved, but we know at least one person was suffering in there and had injuries that could perhaps have been treatable in that time period. And so it boggles the mind. And if the answer is because they were following training, and if that training is from a militarized blueprint, we are, after all of this, we spend days in this news cycle, and everybody is outraged and wants to do everything. Time moves on. We go through the pattern several times a year, it feels like, and then something like this happens where there are all of these opportunities to intervene and to take preventative measures, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, and after Mike Brown was killed in Ferguson, there was this massive show of militarized force by all the local police forces. There was a moment where there was a national conversation around police militarization, and people were like, wait a minute, why does this police force that has 6 officers have 6 up-armored Humvees?
Right.
Like, what, that looks like, is that a cannon that they brought out? Like, what is going on here? And unfortunately, and there was momentum to roll that back and say, no, you know what? If you want to join the military, join the military. If you want to protect and serve your community, then you join a local police force. There was momentum in that direction. It got moved off into kind of more different types of police reform or defund the police or other more kind of radical solutions. Although, how radical are they if they don't actually ever have a chance of getting implemented? Like the real radical step would say, no, fundamentally policing is broken by militarization in this country. It needs fundamental radical change back to the Andy Griffith days.
Yeah.
Like Andy would have run into that school.
This gets to, I think, just so many things are broken in this country. And what is the most upsetting is we don't seem to have any, this is a good example, all of the missed preventative measures here. And we're learning more about them every day. And I don't think the picture is going to get any better for the local law enforcement as time goes by. We can't even fix the problems. We can't even have the conversations about what the solutions are. And that's why things happen over and over and over again. And even when we spend weeks upset and outraged and genuinely, I mean, this is not, for the vast majority of Americans, this is not feigned outrage. Everybody is disgusted here. But even with all of this emotion and all of this desire to stop the problem, we can't.
Yeah. I think, we need to remember that this isn't cowardice. Because, as you saw, a lot of police officers went in and got their own kids. This is training.
Yeah.
They're acting how they were trained to do. And you can't rely on a system that asks for people to be heroes and break from their training in order to succeed. You need to train them to do the right things.
It could be a combination of both, because we have seen law enforcement answering particular questions when, why didn't more police go in and said, well, they could have been shot. Yes, yes, they could have been shot.
Right. And their training is the number one thing is to keep yourself out of harm's way and get yourself home safely. That is their current philosophy. I understand why that would be their philosophy, but that's it. But that's the job you sign up for.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. It's incredible. The details, as details continue to emerge, it just keeps looking worse and worse.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about this more on your radar.
That's right.
Coming up next.
Yeah.